It's excellent to have two really top sessions here. We'll be hearing from the CEO of Mubadala Petroleum and Petrochemicals, Musaba Al-Kalbi, in our second session today. We're honored to come and join us in the last minute, in the last 24 hours from Nigeria, His Excellency Emmanuel Kwachuku. Just for a broad brush look at Nigeria, first and foremost, we're looking at proven reserves on oil of 37 billion barrels with a near-term target to take it to 40. We often don't have the conversation about natural gas in the overall strategic nature of Nigeria. This Minister of State definitely has it on his radar to attract foreign direct investment. One of the key mandates for him is to get better collaboration and much more transparency out of the Nigeria National Petroleum Company. This is something he's been wrestling with, and he makes no hidden secrets about that effort. There's been some phenomenal news coming out of Nigeria in the last 24 hours, and it has to deal with the Niger Delta. Our minister is from that region, knows it very, very well. There was a strike force that took out one of the leaders, which we'll talk about, and the influence this will have both on production of oil, the ability to explore gas, and very importantly, take in investment. The other key theme, of course, for Nigeria is the difference between, say, $40 to $45, $50 to $55, and $65 to $70 with regards to its investment and balancing its budget, and the ability for him to take some of that investment and increase the proven reserves. I'll leave it there because it provides a good, ample roadmap to conversation. What he calls the big 7 ideas or accomplishments and goals within to the Nigerian energy landscape. Let's welcome Emmanuel Kwachuku, His Excellency, the Minister of Petroleum. We had a chance to hear from you on the roundtable on the OPEC ideas, yes, but now we get a chance to drill into the Nigeria landscape. It's great to have you. Thanks for coming up on very, very short notice.
Thank you.
It's good to have you at the Atlantic Council. First and foremost, I touched upon it in my opening comments here. Everybody talks about, oh, this is fantastic. We get to $65 or $70 a barrel. But I think it's excellent to get a real snapshot at what does it mean for individual countries. I know Angola, Venezuela have struggled with a lower oil price. What does it mean to have 65 or 70 specifically for Nigeria?
Well, it's very critical. Nigeria has a population of 180 million people. Development is still relatively on the low side, working very hard at it. Oil is the mainstay of the economy. 70–75% of foreign exchange comes from oil. So literally everything that happens for oil production or gas production is key to the survival of the economy, key to the balancing our budget. We're running with a deficit budget for, over the last couple of years. And given a history before this government, before the government of President Muhammadu Buhari, of, quite frankly, a lot of frivolity in terms of oil resources. I remember the first meeting that I had with my colleague from UAE, and we sat in his office, and he kept saying, look, you know, the key job you've got to do here is transparency. Unless you can get to a point where everybody believes Nigeria really is serious about cleaning up, you're not going to have investors come in. And that was an advice from a friend and a brother to myself. And so it underpinned some of the things that I had to do very early in the game. So oil income is extremely key. The movement in pricing to 65, 70, not expected, quite frankly, but very, very helpful. So obviously everything we can do to keep those prices at a reasonably high level, fine. Obviously not the absurd level we used to have in the past.
Good. Can you sustain $65, $70 for the year with this collective OPEC, non-OPEC agreement? Is it realistic to protect it for all of 2018?
I think what we started about a year ago was that if we got $60 a barrel, most members of the OPEC family were happy, coming from an all-time low of about 28, 29. And so I'm not sure that the resolve is one of trying to ensure or embrace and hold on to your $70. The resolve is to have a reasonable figure that allows investment and at the same time allows consumers some number that gets them comfortable to being able to be good consumers and continue to expand the growth in the market. And that number is somewhere in the 60s. Does it get to 70? Fantastic.
But that can be held in your view.
But I think we're going to do everything that we can. Certainly there's a collective resolve to do whatever we can, collaboration, multitasking, relationship building, engagements, and obviously discipline in terms of the decisions that have been reached by OPEC to try and protect that. But I don't think the philosophy is going to protect a price. I think the philosophy is going to protect a business model. Business model meaning we recognize the impact of shale producers. We recognize the fact that there's competition for market share. But we've left market share and we're saying let's get a global economy that sits stable. And I think once we start from there, the prices, and that's what we've done over the last 2 years, and the prices begin to then climb as a result of that business model, as opposed to protecting the market or protecting the pricing and then driving a model from it. So it's the other way around.
Let's be realistic. Say the U.S. Production surges to 10.5 million barrels a day. It takes you in the leagues of Saudi Arabia and Russia. That really shakes the apple cart of the OPEC, non-OPEC deal.
I try not to go too far away because we never saw this coming. Yes, there are risks. U.S. is getting very bullish about their production, no doubt about it. In a Trump era, you'll expect that even much more so. But at the end of the day, I've always said that the challenge for OPEC really is going back to the fundamentals. We are still the least cost producer. And we need to be able to protect that ability, which is why when costs of production begin to go off the roof, you need to worry about it. And countries who have been able to manage their cost of production have been able to survive in very difficult times. So the first is being able to survive in very low numbers. Second is making sure you are outperforming the shale producers, because if shale producers get to a point where, through the advantage of technology and discipline and investment, they begin to have cost operations that are better than OPEC, then we're in serious trouble. Then you're not protecting costs. I mean, you're not protecting prices. You're actually dealing with being decimated by costs.
Quite a turning point. Quite a turning point with the news on Friday that you took out the leader of the Niger Delta Avengers. It was a SWAT force that went in, and there was over 70 deaths. Is this a turning point now where you can build from this point forward in the South or not?
This is one of those I would have liked to plead a Fifth Amendment, but I'm not sure we went in to take out anybody. I think it was part of the normal military apparatus in keeping security. Bear in mind that when I went into this with a few of my colleagues in the Niger Delta focus, it was both an issue of engagement, both an issue of getting everybody into the room to feel a sense of belonging in the whole management of the oil resources. But at the same time, it was also heightened security, making sure that the security apparatus were firmed up and a lot more disciplined, a lot more focused on the issues. And I think we've never been able to say A or B or C is the leader of Avengers. There are lots of leaders. So the difficulty in saying we took out one person who is a leader creates a feeling of, oh, it's all over. No, the issue of Niger Delta is not about one organization. It's about a community feeling a sense of wanting to be seen as relevant in the scheme of things because they believe they have the resources. So Avengers is just one of those many. And even within the Avengers, there are lots of leaders. So the government didn't go out targeting to take out anybody. I think it went out in this normal operation to keep sanity in the area, and it's potentially possible that somebody was impacted.
Would you describe this as a turning point? You're from that part of the country. Security is a huge issue. If you're not careful, it drives away particularly oil and gas investment. Yes. Can this be the turning point in the South?
No, I think the turning point was the engagement of the community. The turning point isn't who you take out, because there are lots of entities that are involved in this. There are lots of individuals who are leaders in the area. And it is not a war against a specific individual, because it's very risky to prime this as an all-out success factor. And so we started heading back to our volumes about a year ago. This individual was still there. So potentially even the impact had become so diminished. So really I think the turning point was about a year ago, a year and a half ago, when we made a conscious decision that there was a need for more engagement. There was a need to understand what was the concerns of the individuals. There was a need for oil companies to adopt a transparency model of production and begin to look at the environment. There was a need to ensure that some of those resources were being pumped back into the community. That was the turning point. The turning point is not about elimination of an individual.
Can you get to a stage where you earmark some of the revenues reserves from oil and eventually gas that goes back into the South for development. Isn't that what the cry is from the South?
Yes, and that historically had started occurring. What has happened, though, is that as income suffered in terms of budget, every other aspect of our life suffered, inclusive of monies designated for those areas. We could do more, and I think the president is extremely committed to doing that. We have the Niger Delta Development Commission, through which a lot of money goes into the system. We have percentages of development given where the oil companies are allowed to set up certain amounts to focus on development. We have amounts through derivation that goes to state governments, and indeed, the largest sum of some of the derivative incomes for states come from oil, and that's sent out every month. So you take all in all, a huge amount. In fact, by some estimates, over 20 billion over a short period of time is actually gone to the community. Now, how well that was used, whether some of that was diverted into fraud or mismanaged in terms of the development plans, whether the individuals, the focus areas were the right focus areas for those communities, all now for us to look at. More important is the business model. How do you get to ensure that the development model permeates the very segment of the society, so that schools are built, there are soft loans for individuals who want to do business? Because bear in mind, this is a terrain where you hardly can do agriculture. And a lot of the environment is fairly destroyed in the process of producing oil. So you've got to look at alternative means of income. And once you don't have that, other people begin to get into crime, into militancy, and the frustration in the area boils over. So it is the business model that is key, and that's one of the things that we're focused on. Just 3-4 months ago, I began to do rounds again to these communities, beginning to sign MOUs, which get the state government, get the security apparatus, get the oil companies, get the stakeholders into one room to begin to say, what is the model of development you're looking for? What are the key things that is important for you? Because we have a tendency of thinking we can think for them. You know, what is it you want? And then we begin to craft MOUs along those lines of development.
There's this huge question mark that we see sporadically with regards to security in the South and then in the Northeast when you went to develop oil and gas in the Northeast. Is this now in a situation where we can mark a new beginning on security, both with Boko Haram in the north and with the Niger Delta Avengers, or not?
Well, Boko Haram in the north wasn't really focused on mineral development. It was simply a political upheaval arising from...
You did have attacks, though,
yes.
a year ago with
Yes.
looking at development of oil and gas.
Yes, but it was simply, how will I say, it was something that came... the focus wasn't to go and attack oil production. The focus was simply a reaction each time Boko Haram sees anybody who seems to be creating some development, they zoom into those areas. And by some sheer coincidence, our people were there. But on the whole, we've carried out explorations and drillings in Lake Chad area without issues before that time, and have continued thereafter, and as we go back in there without much of an effort. So the problem in the north is a lot larger. It is a philosophical issue. The problem in the south is very geared, very focused really on entitlement and on relevance, as it were, and on fairness in the minds of the South-South bloc. So two different philosophies driving two different types of chaos, as it were, but all together impacting the general economy. And so in some very many respects, the president of the government of President Buhari has had to deal with very, very serious security issues, both up in the north and up in the south, in trying to create stability within the country. So
I read an online poll, and it was about 6,600 participants that was voting to have President Buhari not be the Minister of Petroleum and you as the Minister of State, almost suggesting you should take over the entire ministry. He was trying to give you political cover so you could do the reforms you want to push through the Nigerian National Petroleum Company. Do you like the structure the way it is now, or should you be in charge of the whole apparatus? Has his time come to step off of the Ministry of Petroleum?
I think it was very presumptive. I didn't seek an election. The president sought an election, and the executive powers belong to him. He decides how he structures his government.
It was interesting that people were saying something different.
Well,
I was wondering why.
Well, the reality is that when we first started, the sort of changes you needed to do within the NNPC apparatus, within the oil sector, was going to be so brutal that you needed some real political coverage. I was coming in from a point of view of a corporate chief, not having been versed in the politics. And I think he felt he needed to protect what it was I was doing. And bear in mind, within the first 2-3 weeks, we took away literally the top hierarchy of NNPC. So those are major moves. We began to change a lot of policies on commercial pricing, commercial contracts, on entitlements, on allocations, on everything. It was a massive restructuring of a 10,000 man organization that had lasted for over 30, 40 years. And I think it made a lot of sense at the time to just let one steep into the work and not get involved in the political nuances of it. Now, whether things have changed over time, only he can determine. But quite frankly, nomenclatures, if you work in corporate setups, you know that titles are the least relevant of responsibilities. Nomenclatures are not really important. It is the power that you have to do your work. It is the freedom to do it, it is the protection that you need to do, and it is the focus. And I think I've, over the last 2.5 years, been very focused on the things that need to be done in the sector and try to downplay the issues of politics that go with these things.
If I can be candid here, it seems almost ridiculous for a country with 37 billion barrels to have petrol shortages. Mm-hmm. And I know you're trying to overhaul the independent marketers that control the distribution. Mm-hmm. Why do we still have shortages? We saw it over the month of December.
Yes, it's not something we're very proud of. Over the last 2 years, that had gone. If you remember, one of the things we did was to try and move towards a liberal philosophy. So the pricing was changed, and the effect of that was that scarcities and queues and all that got eliminated. In December, that came back. Lots of factors. Once you have a differentiation of landing cost of the product, we're largely still importing the product. We are not producing 100% with the refinery, because refineries are still a problem. So once you're importing and there's a landing cost price that is different, from the pump price, is a problem. Now you have, therefore, from a pure economics, the landing price is shifted from where analysis was done 2 years ago. But then you also have a president who is mindful of the fact that there's a lot of suffering in the land, and he wants to be sure that we do not impose prices that create a problem. Look at what is happening in Venezuela and a couple of these countries where just the sheer movement of price of a commodity has caused so much confusion. So I can well understand it's difficult in this. So my duty is to try and guide in such a way that even if you're going to return those, what are the philosophies you go to, or economic models you got to put in place to ensure that the product is easily available, and those who play in the field feel free enough to bring in those products. I think there was a disconnect in that. And once you have that disconnect, you begin to have illegal exportation. All our neighbors around Nigeria sell products at prices that are at least 2 to 3 times the price of product in Nigeria. So before you realize it, you're actually providing subsidy, for foreign countries. And then you have an incentive for everybody who wants to illegally export the product to do so, which is usually the argument why you should not have a subsidy of products. But the reality is, coming from a deficit environment, coming from, we just came out of recession, you could not actually be moving heavily on pricing in a recessive environment. You just create a lot of confusion. At the end of the day, the number one factor that is important in Nigeria is peace. If we have the peace, then we can do the development. If we have chaos, you're not going to do development. So we're working on that. I think pretty soon we're going to be able to solve that. We've already seen most of those queues cleared out in most of the high commercial areas. So the group managing director is working very heavily on that under my direction.
How do you explain it to the Nigerian people, though, to be resource rich, but have bottlenecks in distribution that affects their lives?
There's no explanation. The only explanation is to go build the refineries, get them to work. And one of the things we focused on is that the 3 refineries that we have in Nigeria must work. I set a deadline of about 2019 December. We're working very hard at it. We expect that, all things being equal, we should begin the actual renovation of these refineries over the next 1-2 months. So we're very heavy on that. We're keeping to those timelines. But the other icing on the cake is that a private refiner, Dangote, is also fairly far gone in the 650,000 barrel refinery construction. And then Ajip also has made a commitment to do 150,000 barrels of refinery. We've just licensed about 10 modular refineries with 20 barrels each spread across very many states. So you take all of that, you're going to go from a position today where you're processing or refining less than 50 to 80,000 barrels a day to one in which you're refining about 1.4 to 1.5 million barrels a day between 2019 and 2020. So that's a major, major move that hasn't happened. And I think that's what we need to keep doing. Unless you get that to happen, you're going to continue to be in the importation environment, and the prices are going to keep shifting around you.
Good. We have a slide here, the 7 big wins as you see it in the ministry. If we can bring those up, it'd be great for you to give us a narrative. We have it behind the screen here, if you want to take a peek, because it's hard to read off of that screen. Policy and regulation, the business environment, gas revolution, refineries and local production capacity. We talked about the Niger Delta's security, transparency and efficiency, stakeholder management. If you bundled those together, Minister, how far along are we in this 7-win strategy?
Fairly far gone. We launched, the president launched this about 1.5 years ago. And the whole idea was to put a philosophical nexus to what we're doing rather than having them piecemeals. And so we set up the 7 big wins as the critical things we think over a period of 4 years we should be far gone in. And that will underpin the movement of the Nigerian petroleum industry. The first one, the policy and regulation, we've passed the oil policy already. It's been approved by the Federal Executive Council. The national gas policy has been approved. The downstream policy has been approved. So we've developed those, gotten approvals, we're already implementing those. The fourth one, which is the fiscal reform policy, we've developed that, but there's still a lot of engagement that requires to happen with the oil companies and the players in this sector to make sure that the fairly aggressive fiscal policy we're trying to drive doesn't also kill investments in the sector. So that is ongoing. We hope to have that between now and the end of the month and begin to take that to the Federal Executive Council for approval. So out of the 4 or 5, 3 are gone, 1 is almost there. And of course, the petroleum industry bill is going to be handled by the National Assembly. The Senate has passed that. It's gone back to the House, and they're trying to have a collaborative bill that covers both. The timeline that they put on that is June of this year. If we succeed in doing all this, this is something that over the last 10, 15 years we've not been able to accomplish. So that we're moving fairly aggressively on those. Business environment, one of the first things we did was on financing and cash calls. Like you know, we got an approval from Federal Executive Council, and we came up with a policy that enabled us to shift away from cash call in such a way that you can actually charge out the cost of production before you begin to divvy out the monies among the Federal Executive, the FAC members. Otherwise, what was happening was that the government took in all the money, and there was no money brought back for production, and that continued to kill the oil industry. Since doing that, we've seen an increase of about 20 to 30% in terms of investments in the sector. We've seen the near announcements of FIDs in Zabazaba, in Bonga Southwest, and the rest. So a lot of the multinationals are back in, and drilling explorations and drilling activities have basically inched up rapidly.
Interesting. Can you get your reserves from, I think, estimated 37 today billion barrels?
To 40.
To 40?
Yes.
When can you do that?
I think over the next 3 years, we should be able to get to that 40. Some of them are very low-hanging fruits. The reserves already there. Exploration was fairly far gone, but suspended when the cash call issue became a problem. So we should be able to get that fairly quickly. I will expect that over a 2023, 2024 time period, we should get those reserves up to about 40 million barrels.
Okay, final question. I remember covering this before you were minister, and the former central bank governor, who's now the Emir of Kano, when he was at the central bank, was suggesting there was corruption of some $25 billion in the entire Nigerian energy sector. And then the Minister of Finance was suggesting, no, it was more like $2.5 billion. Did we ever really uncover what was lost to the state before your time?
What I do know is that the president has a single-minded purpose against corruption. And if you see the amount of individuals who've been arrested on corruptive charges from previous governments, not just the last one, if you see the lots of officials who have been thrown into detention as a result of this, if you see the amount of recovered stolen government loot, that is run into billions. So he's very focused on this. In terms of the specifics of whether the 25 was right, I think the opinion nowadays is that the 25 was a bit exaggerated. But what the specifics are, I do not have those details. But I do know that every single issue of corruptive undertaking that has been reported and found to have some credibility has been pursued all the way to investigation levels.
Good. How about the managing director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company? He seems to be at odds with you at different times on where you should be going with the industry. It's always nice to have a healthy tension, but this has boiled over a few times. What's your view?
No, first of all, the managing director of Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation technically reports to me. He was a staff of mine under NNPC. So it isn't a personality.
I love the word technically.
Yes, technically, because see, as long as the president is Minister of Petroleum, the laws are very clear in terms of what the reporting lines should be. So he takes the final decisions. We work collaboratively to try and enforce some of that discipline, some of that oversight issues. But there were times when in any country, and this happens all over any oil-producing country in the world, where you find that the head of state or the president will make a final call on certain issues. Whether or not he's Minister of Petroleum, there are certain powers that presidents will exercise. I have tried to emphasize less. If there are divergences of opinion sometimes which will happen, it is healthy. I don't have a monopoly of knowledge, neither does he. Working collaboratively brings out the best. What is important is don't make that personal. It's not a personal issue. We may have issues of disagreement on policy directions, but to be honest, we've also been very collaborative because without those, don't forget I'm chairman of NNPC. So at the end of all that conversation, we still come back to the board. The board still has a role. So it is not as, there's a lot of sensationalism around it. On the whole, I think we're learning to work collectively together, because that's the only way to move the country forward.
Okay, I kept on saying last question. I think good the thoughts of, at the last OPEC meeting, there was talk of getting you to sit down and say, I commit not to go over 2.3 million barrels a day, and I don't really care about the number. But give us a sense of what would be the tension between within the OPEC apparatus when you're trying to build up production, and the discipline right now in OPEC is to keep everybody together and kind of limit production. It must be quite an intense squeeze behind closed doors. I mean, we talk about this collective unity, but share with the audience what it's really like when you sit one-on-one, say, with a Khalid Al-Faleh, who's not a minor league player.
Yeah, I think the wisdom in the room is one of engagement. The reality is there's no OPEC member, that has a monopoly of positions, but that's why it's a collective. For a country like Nigeria requires all the barrels it can produce. We've gone through about 4 years of very difficult times, a very, very biting recessive economy, trying to put that out, huge and expanding population, all kinds of social issues, inclusive of conflicts in the north and the east. So we have a huge need for funding. And so it's pretty difficult to leave the country and come for meetings where somebody's telling you, you have a chance of making a few more barrels, but please don't do it. It's not a good sell. But so are also the challenges of every country, even the richest ones, Saudi Arabia inclusive, and all have their own economic challenges, looking for more income. We've all been spoiled coming from an environment where you literally had everything that you wanted, to a point where you now have to struggle to have a little, and that goes around every OPEC member. So I think the wisdom for me was always understand that your problem is as unique as it is not alone. Everybody has their own unique problems, and everybody's looking for the same big pot. And to the extent, therefore, you can engage. And I joined the organization straight away and became the president of OPEC. And so at that point, really, Nigeria's interest was subordinated a little bit to the collective interest of the whole until I handed over. But that interest is still subordinated, because at the end of the day, the success of the whole enables you to get faster with the needs of the single. If you pursue that singular interest so badly, you're not going to get a union. And in any case, you don't have the fighting muscle in terms of size of production or volume to be able to push those ideas on a unilateral basis. So it is a shifting sand. It's a difficult mix. We've had a few shouting matches in closed doors on some of these issues, but the leadership of people who have been presidents of OPEC and the Secretary General has been very key in making sure at the end of the day we lock ourselves up, we come to solutions, because the confusion out there once you step out without an agreement, you can't even imagine it. And I think that's enough barometer to keep all of us in check, and that has worked.
Great. Nice to see you. Thanks
you.
for taking all the questions and being very candid. Let's give a nice warm welcome and thanks for Emmanuel Touchgroup. Nicely done.